Ladies and gentlemen, can I please have your attention?
When was the last time you saw a truly great comedy movie? One that made you laugh out loud, and when it ended, you knew it would be a film that you would quote and remember for a very long time. If you're like me, you probably have to go back years and years to find a comedy movie that's genuinely hilarious and memorable, especially one that was released in theaters. So what happened to comedy movies, and will they ever return to the big screen? Let's find out. Even though it seems like comedy movies have all but disappeared, there are certainly still movies releasing within the genre. Most of the ones being released nowadays just end up going straight to streaming, and this has created a huge lack of blockbuster-style comedy movies like we used to have. On top of this, it feels like comedy movies that are being released just aren't up to par with the comedy films of the past. This isn't to say that people don't find newer comedies funny, because everyone's sense of humor is different, but there hasn't been one in recent years that has garnished the attention of the masses. Let's go back to 2009, when The Hangover hit theaters. The movie was an absolute success, bringing in around $469 million worldwide, and it felt like anyone and everyone was talking about it. Critics were praising it, people were quoting it nonstop, and it felt like the film was everywhere. Even to this day, I still hear people referencing the film. The success of The Hangover, as well as other comedies, made studios want to produce more of these types of films. This is the type of comedy movie that has seemed to disappear, and I think there's a number of different factors to why this is. Physical media has been on the decline ever since the rise and popularity of streaming services. Between 2006 and 2019, DVD sales dropped around 86%, and since 2018, Blu-ray sales have also continued to decline. Many people are choosing digital over physical media, and in return, this has actually played a key role in why we see less comedy movies than we used to, especially R-rated comedies. Comedy movies used to rely heavily on making money from DVD sales, and studios knew if the film didn't perform super well in the box office, they would most likely make up for that when the film hit store shelves. Take Office Space from 1999 as an example. The film had a budget of $10 million and only brought in around 12 in the box office. Even though it was seen as a flop, the movie then went on to make around $10 million in video sales. Even movies that were successful in the box office, such as Wedding Crashers, that became the first R-rated comedy to make over $200 million, went on to make another $145 million in DVD sales. This type of success post-release really drove studios to continue making these types of comedies, but by the 2010s, Netflix had quickly become one of the most popular streaming services. In 2008, comedy movies made up around 20% of the total movie market, but in 2024, they only accounted for around 10%. Even though comedies have become more rare on the big screen, and we don't get those blockbuster-style comedies very often, streaming services have sort of become the replacement. It's a lot less of a risk to make a $10 to $20 million comedy and slap it on a streaming service where it'll live forever, versus spending that same amount plus millions more trying to market a movie so people come out to the theater to see it. Studios are only willing to jump on opportunities and put out films that are more guaranteed to make money. It's a sad reality, but then again, it's also a business. In general, studios have shifted away from creating and releasing mid-budget movies, and most comedies fall into this category. There's certainly some mid-budgets that still hit theaters, but they're often self-funded or funded by a smaller studio, then distributed by a bigger one, such as Trap that came out in 2024. It was self-funded by M. Night Shyamalan and then later distributed by Warner Brothers. Like I mentioned before, these mid-budget films aren't very attractive to big studios because the return on investment is much more risky. Hollywood does like high-risk films, but they want a high return as well. The typical rule in Hollywood is that a film needs to make around 2.5 times its budget in order to be considered profitable, because you still have to account for any costs after the film is wrapped up, such as marketing. So say a film was made for $20 million, it would need to make around $50 million to be quote-unquote successful. To many of us, this seems like a high return, concerned, but when a movie like Dune Part 2 can be made for around $190 million, and the first film already made $410 million, the studio is most likely going to gamble on making a second one and hoping it makes around a similar amount, or in the case of Dune Part 2, actually making more and bringing in around $714 million. Studios would much rather invest in an IP that's already well known and has been proven to make them money. That's why we see so many franchise films, sequels, and remakes. On top of this, if people are going to the theater, they want an experience. That's why a lot of blockbuster movies are either action-packed or horror movies. These types of films often have a lot of visual and practical effects that are very expensive to pull off. A lot of audiences want a spectacle if they're going to spend their time and money at a theater, and straight-up comedies don't fit the bill. Another reason comedies have declined is because of how much American films rely on profits from the overseas market. Up until about 2003, the domestic market is where Hollywood made most of their money, but as of 2024, the international market accounted for almost 73% of revenue. What an American audience might find funny doesn't always translate well to the foreign market, and that's where the majority of the money is being made. Let's look at a couple examples. 2024's highest grossing film was Inside Out 2, an animated family comedy that brought in around $652 million in the domestic box office, and then another whopping $1 billion overseas. This film was able to capture a huge audience because 1, the first film was a huge success, 2, kids really wanted to see it, and therefore a lot of parents ended up having to go see it with them, and 3, the film is very relatable because it explores emotions, which of course we all have. The film definitely has comedy in it, but the reason it works is because the humor is more universal and translates across all languages. Unlike a pure American comedy such as Talladega Nights that made $163 million domestically, but only $15 million internationally. This type of comedy just doesn't translate at all in the foreign market. The jokes are just way too specific to American culture for it to have any huge success elsewhere, and this holds true with a lot of comedies we love here in the States. Therefore, studios would rather focus on movies that can reach a broader audience and have success in markets all over the world. Something else that seems to be impacting comedy movies is the fact that a lot of comedic actors and writers are working on TV shows. This has become another way to still make comedies without having to spend a lot of money making and marketing them. Take Abbott Elementary, one of ABC's most popular shows, as an example. It's estimated to cost anywhere from $200,000 to $400,000 to make per episode. The first season had 13 episodes, so at most it only cost around $5 million to make if the estimates on how much each episode costs are accurate. After ABC saw the success of the first season, they then allowed for more episodes to be made for the following seasons. Network TV shows like this benefit from the fact that the network they air on make the majority of their money from advertisements, so as long as the show is bringing in solid viewership, it's most likely to stick around for a while. There's a lot less of a risk to make a comedy TV show than there is spending tens of millions of dollars on a movie that could fail and not have the safety net of a TV network that makes money off other shows and advertisements. On top of all of this, TV shows can also be for a more targeted audience since the networks putting them out are mainly being watched domestically, and these networks know who's tuning in to watch the shows. They don't have to worry about these shows being successful elsewhere, but can still pop them on a streaming service to gain some more viewership. Plus, a lot of networks like ABC have licensing deals with these companies, so they can make additional revenue this way as well. With platforms like YouTube having over 122 million active users daily and over 1 billion hours of content being watched on a daily basis, it makes a lot of sense that comedic content is only growing more and more across the internet. Similar to TV shows, there's even less risk putting out content on the internet because you can capture an even more specific audience and grow it to huge numbers. If you're able to find that audience, then you can almost guarantee a certain amount of viewership every time you post. As the internet has continued to grow, so has the quality of content being put out independently, and a lot of creators make these videos with a far smaller budget than TV shows and especially movies. Let's take a look at one of my favorite sketch comedy YouTube channels as an example. Almost Friday is a channel that started back in 2022, and since then they've gained over 600,000 subscribers and have racked in over 135 million views across their videos. Most of their videos hit around 500,000 to 1 million views each time they post. They've grown big enough where well-known actors and actresses are appearing in their comedy sketches, such as Sarah Levy from Schitt's Creek and Sam Brown from The Whitest Kids You Know. As their content has evolved, the production quality, writing, and acting has only gotten better. The great thing about making content on the internet is you have the freedom to try new ideas and create the things you want without being held down by a production company or network. The internet allows for so many avenues of comedy to exist. Whether it's short content like on TikTok, long-form content on YouTube, simple things like memes, or even satirical articles and posts. It's really opened the floodgates for content and has allowed anyone to take a chance at making something funny. As great as the internet has been for humor, in a way, it has hurt comedy movies. A lot of comedies tend to rely on jokes that are topical, and since the news cycle and stories move so quickly today because of the internet, something that was being shared everywhere yesterday could be gone the next. This is a major factor in why parody/spoof movies ultimately disappeared. TV shows that air weekly can get away with making jokes about current events a little easier than movies can, but I think the internet has definitely made an impact on comedies overall. Mixing genres in movies is extremely common today. Studios want to put out films that can reach as many people as possible, so if a film can mix action, romance, and comedy all into one to attract fans of all these genres and connect with people all over the world, then why not do it? Marvel films are a great example of this. They have tons of action, some have romance, elements of sci-fi, and lots of comedy, even if a lot of the jokes don't land. With how successful cross-genre films are, it makes total sense that we see more and more of these. At the same time, the success of these types of movies have impacted regular old comedies. Now don't get me wrong, there's always been popular comedies that mixed genres, such as Blazing Saddles, Monty Python, and the Blues Brothers, just to name a few. But alongside these were a lot more straightforward comedies as well. There's a lot of pros to mixing genres, as it gives filmmakers more creativity, reaches a broader audience, and can actually add a unique spin to a film, but it seems like by doing this, filmmakers have forgotten that you can just make a comedy film that isn't anything but that. Also, by trying to add every genre possible to a film, the comedy often becomes secondary, leading to very forgettable and unfunny jokes. The humor is just there to check off a box and hope it'll get a laugh, but if it doesn't, it's no big deal because the film is doing all this other stuff. The classic comedies that did explore other genres put the comedy first, and I think this is very rare today. This topic can certainly get controversial and has been talked about time and time again, but I can't ignore the fact that society and the current time we live in has impacted comedy movies in a big way. The reality is everyone is concerned about offending someone, and comedies are often very offensive. Films like Tropic Thunder, The Hangover, and Ace Ventura would be attacked and shamed if they were released today. Filmmakers are sadly being restricted by this because they don't want to risk making something that could gain negative attention. Comedy should be something that brings us together. We should be able to laugh at ourselves and others, but Hollywood almost seems to have this idea of being better than everyone else, and therefore they feel like the bigger guys by not making jokes about people who are quote-unquote below them. This has put modern comedies in a very odd place because a lot of the humor now is focused on politics or some big overall message, and films can't just be funny to be funny. Comedy movies have been on a steep decline over the past several years. A genre that was once taking risks, making people laugh, and dominating the box office has become a rarity. Less physical media, studios not wanting to make mid-budget movies, the rise of the internet, and the shift in our culture has all played a part in impacting comedies. The good news is people are craving another great comedy film, and with the state of the world, now is a prime opportunity to make one happen. There's never been a moment in history where humor wasn't needed. Sometimes we just need to laugh at ourselves and forget about everything going on around us. I don't think comedy has disappeared, it's just moved to other avenues, whether that's stand-up, podcasts, or videos on the internet. And the places and people still doing it are finding huge success. I just hope the film industry will recognize this and take a risk on another blockbuster comedy. I'm curious to hear your thoughts on comedies and what some of your favorite ones are. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to drop a like and consider subscribing. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.